Before seeing the students' efforts, let's remind ourselves how political party advertising in New Zealand has changed over the decades.
The National Party covers the country as a whole.
This National Party ad, when Jack Marshall was Prime Minister and Rob Muldoon as Deputy, shows you just how dull political ads used to be.
Man for man, the strongest team. Vote National.
But Bob Harvey's groundbreaking Labour ad of '72 changed all that. Split screen, a song and a vision made things happen for Big Norm Kirk.
Make things happen this year.
It's your turn now to make things happen.
Superannuation scheme isn't just...
The Nats, not wishing to be upstaged again in '75, hardened things up, famously linking communism and Cossacks to Labour's superannuation plans.
They say they've only just begun.
The controversy over the Cossacks had just begun, which may be why Labour's '78 campaign dripped with inclusivity. But it didn't get Bill Rolling into power. Muldoon's We're Keeping Our Word campaign won the day.
The ballots on compulsory versus voluntary unionism are being held.
The highlight, looking back, undoubtedly Winston playing journalist, asking the hard questions.
Mr. Muldoon, would you explain the new industrial law?
Well, the Labor government took all the penalties out of the industrial law.
The police are steadily losing the war against crime.
By 1987, National, under Jim Bolger, had introduced a new level of drama to their ads.
On August 15th, let's get New Zealand right. Vote National.
But David Longy was running the show by then, and even this fairly stodgy Labour ad and another schmaltzy song couldn't hold him back from a second term in power.
The new Labour government, bringing New Zealand together.
From the late 80s, television remained the centre of political advertising till last elections, when suddenly the focus flicked from the screen to the billboard. And that's the way it seems set for this year's election.
On April Fool's Day, the Labour government started a compulsory superannuation scheme and called it a bold piece of social legislation. It wasn't even a very funny joke. What they didn't tell you was that nobody would get its full benefit until the year 2028. If you're one of New Zealand's 500,000 housewives, you don't get anything, ever. The same goes for the 500,000 people over 55 and the 400,000 on Social Security. But the superannuation scheme isn't just one of Labour's bad ideas. It's also a dangerous one. Shortly, Labour will be taking millions out of our pay packets each week and spending it. In just 7 years, they'll have enough money to buy every share in every public company in New Zealand. Soon, they could buy all the farms. Indeed, one day, the government could wind up owning literally everything. And you know what that's called, don't you?
Fed up with being railroaded into the gloom and left in the dark by successive governments? Bewildered about your future employment, security and well-being? You've been handed a line with many faulty points. You deserve prosperity, quality of life and confidence in your future. You need to get out of the tunnel and to see the light. Social Credit New Zealand will signal the change that gives you the ticket to assured jobs, low mortgage interest rates, law and order, lower and fairer taxes, early superannuation, a better health service. Social Credit New Zealand, way to go.
Jim Bolger's promises run into millions. Millions and millions. But can he keep his promises? Ruth Richardson doesn't know how. In this memo, she doesn't know where National will get the money. Jim Bolger's promising things his own finance person hasn't explained. If Ruth's questioning Jim, shouldn't you?
6 years ago, Jack was a skilled builder. Things were looking up. But after 2 terms of Labour government, his world has turned upside down. Jack is one of almost 200,000 New Zealanders who are out of a job. Today, he feels little better than a beggar. But this Saturday, Jack's going to get a chance to do something about it.
First tonight, history in the making. More than 2 million New Zealanders went to the polling booths today for our first MMP election. In less than 1 hour, the polls close and counting begins. The Decision 96 team is standing by to follow progress from 7 o'clock. But right now...
At the end of the day, the first past the post system has, in recent years, finally delivered. It's bailed us out of the hole we dug for ourselves 20 or 30 years ago. And we are now one of the best performing economies in the Western world.
You say the economy would go down the gurgler if we got MMP?
It would put enormous stresses and strains and put the achievements of the last 4 or 5 years at risk without a question.
Steve Murray, is that true?
Peter Shirtcliffe set up a campaign office through which the business community could fund major advertising to oppose MMP.
We believe voting for MMP is gambling with our country's future. Our children could pay the price. Is it a risk we can afford? Tick the top box. Reject MMP.
The Electoral Reform Coalition, on the other hand, had a vast body of people and built up networks of activists through allied organisations and sort of spread that network out so that you know, we found people in every little, in places like Takaka and Kaikoura and Lumsden, and you know, we thought who knows who, and educated them about what MMP was about.
What we're wanting is a system where every vote counts equally, and that pressure groups can't go and tap on the shoulder of their favourite cabinet minister and get what they want, and that's what they stand to lose with MMP.
But what's fairer and simpler than one person, one vote?
What is fairer and simpler is one person with a vote that counts no matter where they live, and parties getting seats in Parliament in proportion to their level of support throughout the community. That's the difference.
In the last week before the referendum, Peter Shirtcliffe's campaign spent more on advertising than the Labour and National parties together.
21 extra MPs who'll cost us millions of dollars every year. Enough is enough. Tick the top box. Reject MMP.
Maybe it was when, as a National Party minister, he criticised his own party for breaking their promises to the elderly. Maybe it was when he went back to Tauranga to win a by-election, when he left the National Party. Maybe it was when the Maori people came to the Beehive to support him when he was fired by Jim Bolger as their minister. Maybe it was when, with hundreds of thousands of forgotten New Zealanders, he formed a new political vehicle to keep the two old parties honest. Or maybe it was when he won the wine box after an 8-year struggle for accountability and won law for all on behalf of the New Zealand taxpayer. Who can say for sure when it was he became a leader? But Winston Peters is the man to lead New Zealand into the next century. He has the leadership qualities. He listens to the people, and most of all, he's prepared to make the financial and personal sacrifices required to make New Zealand great again.
Well, Winston Peters, from where we sit, from where the rest of us sit,
It looks to have been a pretty bruising experience. You've got other options. You've never exercised them. Why choose to go back into the maelstrom again? Why choose to go back to the political arena another time?
Well, it has been a bruising experience, but that's no reason to give up. We've had many battles, many of which we've won, and they've been on important issues which are fundamental to this country. We have a long way to go to turn this country around, and I think it's important that there be a party in the middle of people who are practical, who are not blindly ideological, who've got plain common sense, which used to make this country a great country in economic and political and social terms, to stay there and ensure that that sort of influence takes us into the 21st century.
Could be a numbers game again then, do you think?
Well, maybe, but again, we've learned from our experience. And New Zealand First starts this campaign with the view that we will stay on the crossbenches and vote on the issues as they come up, on their merits, from wherever they might come in the House, or wherever they might come from within the country.
Very, very, very close friends.
The 21st century is going to be about growth, knowledge, innovation.
What government's doing is being a serious partner.
We believe in looking after the many, not just the few. Officers, we really appreciate you treating our flag with respect. We're going to fight like hell to keep that coming. We're not going to run because things get hot. We can take pride in having been part of making it happen.
Being a student, you're not only helping your future, you're helping New Zealand's future. So we think it's only fair that we help you. From next year, under a Labour government, when you pay off your student loan, you won't have to pay any interest. Give your party vote to Labour.
A richer New Zealand has a clean, green economy that works for everyone.
Clean rivers, thriving kids and green jobs.
You can make it happen.
We can make it happen.
Party vote green.
Hello and welcome to the Internet Party. I'm glad to see you here. My name is Kim.com and I'm here to introduce you to a new political party that New Zealand really needs. We need to be strong in the digital economy. We need to protect our privacy rights from intrusions by the government, and we need to fight for a free and open internet.
Kim, I agree. Privacy and internet freedom are paramount for our digital future.
We want to expand the country's internet connectivity. We want to lower the bandwidth prices for users, and we want to make sure that New Zealand becomes a hub for internet businesses where they can thrive and create new jobs. Politicians are so disconnected from the people today. The government is taking over our lives and is taking more and more power. It's time to switch democracy back on and make your voice heard. Join the Internet Party today and let's make New Zealand the best it can be together.
Nobody said it would be easy. But through your hard work and the National Party's economic management, New Zealand is heading in the right direction. Right now, our economy is growing faster than Australia and 28 other OECD countries. This election, the choice is simple. Stay on course to prosperity, or risk it all on who knows what direction. Keep the team that's working. National, working for New Zealand.
Before seeing the students...
You know, we've been watching this really rather angry weather system out on the Tasman. And, I was hoping we were going to see the high there. We good now? We're good. No, my hi to mine. Welcome to Orcon IRL, the election one. With me are Jogai, Bhatt.
Hey, nice to meet you.
And Ximena Smith, who'll be my co-host. You may recognise them from such great radio stations as 95 BFM. Apart from worrying about the weather, what struck me about this is that it's only about 4 weeks ago that we were a few of us were we had a meeting at this bar, and we were wondering how on earth do we make this election interesting. Yeah, I think problem solved. Yeah, probably too interesting for some people. Thanks as ever to Orcon for making these events possible, Matthew and everyone at the Golden Dawn for their continuing hospitality, and Hugh Sunday and his team for the best live streaming in the land.
Woo!
I don't know how many of you saw Neil Finn's live streams on Friday night and the Friday before. Hugh, because he never sleeps, is doing that as well, and I think that's real groundbreaking. Do you call it television? Yeah, I'm calling it television. It's groundbreaking television, and that's we're trying to do something new here as well. And I'm very grateful that you've all turned up, and I fully understand that there's no one sitting in the rain seats. But I actually checked with Rick Breeze, because one of our techs, if you listen to BFM, you'll know Rick Breeze is also a weather forecaster. And we were looking at that big weather system out in the Tasman, and I said, oh, maybe it'll just slide past. And Rick goes, no. But he did hold out the hope that it may weaken, which it better, because it's quite dramatic out there. A word also for those who aren't here. Firstly, any national MPs or candidates, we really tried. I think we tried 6 or 8 of them in the end, and for various reasons they couldn't make it. Never mind. We played their ad, the one that they didn't want played. And, of course, not here are the 2 women that we had originally confirmed as headliners. Jacinda Ardern discovered that your diary gets wiped when you unexpectedly become the leader of the Labour Party. She was really keen on doing it. And, of course, Materia Ture, who is taking the weekend off, and I think if anyone deserves the weekend off, it is surely her.
Woo!
And I think it's actually a measure of the kind of person she is, that after it all went down that day, I messaged her and I thought, well, maybe tomorrow she'll get back to me and we'll see what's going on. And she messaged me back immediately, and in the 5 minutes that it took, had already arranged for James Shaw to stand in for her. And I'm really grateful. She's a gem. I'll be talking to James later on after a chat with 3 of the journalists from this weekend's New Zealand Centre for Investigative Journalism conference, which has been going on at AUT. We'll talk to them about what they do at these conferences and about their takes. They're punditing on the pundits, let's say. After that, all our MPs and candidates will reconvene on one big panel where they'll answer questions submitted by you guys. There is a box at the far end of the bar there. You can write down the questions. We may not ask your question if it's a stupid one or defamatory, but we will try and ask as many questions as possible. And you can play at home as well, hashtag Orcon IRL. There will be someone harvesting those questions. Maybe put question in the tweet so we don't know it's just you venting. Before that, what do you got for us, Ximena? What's your panel?
So my panel, I'll be talking to New Zealand First Tracey Martin, the Opportunities Party's Geoff Simmons, and also Labour's Louisa. We'll be talking about immigration as well as education, which are 2 very big topics to try to squeeze into 20 minutes, but we'll do our best, with education kind of focusing more on tertiary education.
And Jogai, you're first up.
I am first up, and I will be tackling the young'uns. Some of them are newbies, especially to this general election, and so we have Chloe Swarbrick, candidate of the Green Party, and we have Allan from the Labour Party, and we have Stephen Berry, who I haven't seen. Oh, there he is. Hey, Stephen, from ACT. And so we have no time to waste, so if we want to get that started,
I'll leave
I'm
you
happy.
To it.
Okay, awesome. Come on up. Yeah, I'll be happy sitting here. I'll sit on this side, you guys can just come around this way.
Just what?
Get as close to the mic as you can.
Okay.
Do you want, is there any order?
No.
Okay.
I'm just take this off.
Small person.
Yeah.
Lean in.
Yeah. Does anyone know how to take this mic off? Like off the stand? Oh my goodness.
There we go.
God bless Chloe. Okay, I'm just going to get you guys to introduce yourselves. So we will start with Chloe and move our way down.
How long do we...
Just sort of who you are and what you're doing here.
Kia ora, my name's Chloe Swarbrick. I'm 23 years old, I guess, because my
Chloe
age has become
Swarbrick,
incredibly relevant
23.
over the last kind of 12 months. And I am a candidate for the Green Party in Maungakiekia.
Kia ora koutou, tuatahi mihina ki koutou e hui mai I tēnei ahia kia koutou, a tātou nei whānau no te rōpū reiba, ka nui te mihi kia koutou, o tira kia koutou katoa. My name's Kiri, Allan, and I'm Labour's proud East Coast candidate, so if I know nothing about smashed avocados, what's happening up here with your fellas' rates, don't diss me, all right? So, really pleased to be here. Kia ora. Kia ora.
How can I compete with a greeting like that? My name's Stephen Berry. I'm number 5 on the X-Party list. 34 years old. Normally when I'm not doing my career, which costs me a lot of money, I'm doing my other career, which makes somewhat money, working for Countdown Supermarkets.
Woo! Love Countdown. Okay. Okay, so we'll jump right into it. So 2 of you are first-time candidates contesting this year's general election. So Kiri and Chloe, just want to open with you guys. You've suddenly got this elevated status. You're the subject of intense scrutiny. What is it that prompts someone to want to become an MP? So we'll start with Chloe. Oh, and why for the Greens?
So this isn't my first time in the rodeo with regard to elections. So obviously I ran in the local body election last year, and I've come to term that in its most simplest form as my professional protest. So that was me attempting to demonstrate that politics could be done differently, and it could be inclusive and bring people into the conversation as opposed to being this really bizarre kind of dictatorial thing. I wanted people to understand that it was them who had the power and could, all of their politicians are supposed to be working for them. So after that, I kind of had the opportunity to go back into trying to make a change through journalism or continuing down the rabbit hole of politics. And I decided on the latter because I'm not happy with the way things are in our country. I think that Aotearoa is a beautiful country and we've got beautiful, amazing people, but I think that we could be doing a lot better. And I think how we do a lot better is by having some ambition. I also think that climate change is the biggest existential crisis that humanity has ever faced, and I think that it is inextricably linked to inequality. So I think that when we go about solving the one of them, we go about solving the both of them. So that's why the Green Party.
Nice. Okay, well, politics is such an exhaustive kind of sometimes emotionally taxing sphere. So, yeah, same question to you. What made you want to become an MP?
Yeah, it's an interesting one. For me, I looked at the last election results and I saw that 65% of people that look like me don't vote. And I think that for me, like I come from a pretty large family. I'm one of 10 kids. I'm number 9. And I'm from a regional electorate where there is a lot of, I think, just real disconnect from the political infrastructure and system. So I guess it was a bit of a whittle to myself, a bit of a challenge to myself. All right, well, if I care passionately about the future of our nation, then, I've kind of got to put my money where my mouth is. And so, I put my hand up. And I put my hand up for the Labour Party, and I'm really proud to be a member of the Labour Party. We've got a 100-year history of fighting for the little guy. We're a people's party. We were based on the foundation of fighting for workers' rights. Hey, we haven't done everything right in our past. That's 100 years of learning from our learning, really. And I guess for me right now, I was really excited about watching who was coming into the fold. Last week we saw a major change at our leadership level. And to me, I'm really stoked to be part of a team that's focused on reducing social inequalities. When I look around my rohe, when I see 10% of my kids unemployed up in Gisborne, when I look at a massive housing crisis that we've got all throughout the East Coast, I know you fellas have got it here too. I'm not being Auckland area, but we've got huge, big social inequalities. We don't have enough mahi for our kids. For me, all right, the political infrastructure, look, I'm pretty frank about it. We're not going to get our liberation from these political infrastructure and system. This isn't where we're going to get it. It's from our people. But my job, when I put my hand up for our party, it was so that I could fight for the guys that I see that need a hand all throughout Aotearoa, and doing that in conjunction with our grassroots communities, doing in that conjunction with our leaders in our communities. So I think this is just one tiny little role of a really huge big matrix of change that we all need to be kind of chipping in together. So, yeah.
You know, we will let Auckland relax for a bit then, because I want to touch on that a little bit more. You are the East Coast candidate for Labour. And I've been reading the diaries that you've been writing for the spin-off, and you mentioned that the East Coast is the largest general electorate in the North Island. And obviously so much of this campaign is kind of focused on Auckland, and even more so with these inner city suburbs. How's that kind of looking to East Coast voters? Do you feel part of the process? Do you feel excluded?
Interesting question. I mean, look, for us, the issues are the same. It's housing, it's jobs, it's our environment, our taiao. Those are the issues that are of key concern to our whānau. Look, but when I look at issues that have been really blowing up in national media, like the housing crisis here in Auckland, I look at the on-flow consequences for whānau and families and communities in Mairohe. And then I look at towns like Kawerau that had the highest capital gains increase last year, 47% capital gains increase. Now what that means for small towns like Kawerau that have a dying kind of work focus and a huge, big, massive jump in your capital gains and the cost of your home, it means that anybody that was holding rentals there, those are all been sold. It's been marketed to retirees. And so a lot of the families that have lived there for generations and been in rental homes means they're homeless. So homelessness is a huge, big thing in my region. So that's been touched on in the national media. But I think that there are massive issues for all of our regions that I would like to see highlighted more. I sometimes call the regions, particularly ones like mine, the most beautiful electorate in the country. Kia ora. But I often see that we're the poster boy or the poster girl for New Zealand. You know, we look at the movies like Boy, and you look at all those kind of cool movies they focus on our expansive coastlines and our, pristine waters and rugged New Zealand life. We are the pin-up girl, boy for our nation, but we don't get focused on in terms of our infrastructure that we need. It's shoddy. Our communities' stories are, a little bit amiss. So I guess another part of getting involved in more of the national political scene is to bring a highlight to those core issues in our community.
Absolutely. And I just want to go back to Chloe, what you were saying before. Obviously, this isn't your kind of first round in politics, and this one applies to Stephen as well. How does this kind of differ from local body politics? Because obviously you guys ran quite successful campaigns. Stephen, you came second runner-up in the 2013 Auckland mayoral election, and same it goes for Chloe just last year. So what's the most striking difference from going from local body politics to essentially representing your version of Aotearoa?
It's a lot cheaper not to do local body politics because you've got to mortgage up your credit cards to do it. But it is still very interesting all the same, and the solutions to the problems in Auckland, the way of finding them is quite different too. For example, in central body politics, we can just adjust the Resource Management Act to get rid of that rural-urban boundary, whereas in local body politics you don't quite have that sort of option, and you constrict it in quite what you can do.
I see Chloe's furiously disagreeing over here.
That's not the solution, but Stephen can continue.
Didn't your party vote for that a couple of months ago? I'm pretty sure they did.
So on the issue of moving from local body politics to central politics, I guess.
Back to the question.
I cut my teeth debating Phil Goff. That was always going to be a great training ground. But there's quite a difference insofar as when I ran last year, I was quite alone. And that sounds quite depressing, but I had an amazing team of friends, but I didn't have the infrastructure. I didn't know what the hell I was supposed to be doing, so making it up as we were going along. And somewhere along the way, I found it quite uncomfortable and awkward for it turned into the Chloe Swarbrick show. It turned into about me as opposed to about policy. And I think there's quite a lesson in that about the presidentialising of politics as well. But I'm really proud and stoked to be standing with the Green Party because we're a whānau, we're all in this together and we're all fighting there every single day on the phones and on doorsteps. So I'm stoked to be part of a team.
And as you mentioned, especially with your campaign last year, it was really kind of run on social media and on this shoestring budget. Can you touch a little bit on the difference between pretty much depending on people's goodwill to having, a full party support behind you?
Well, the funny thing about the campaign last year is I didn't know phone calling and door knocking existed. So I've learnt that now, and I'm doing that now. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, I guess it's just it's having that infrastructure of a party who knows how you go about winning elections, how you go about winning votes, and further having a solid team. Like one of the things that attracted me to the Green Party is our fully internally democratic processes, and the fact that it's bigger than any one person. Yeah. When you join our party, and there's around 6,500 members around the country, you get to have input on our list, you get to have input on our policy. So I enjoy that fact that I'm part of something bigger than myself. I'm part of a movement.
I can clearly tell you're all very opinionated people. So how does this kind of get in the way in terms of towing the party line and having to, make sure you're showing solidarity and all that?
You have the debates behind doors, and you keep them behind doors, and then once the door's shut, you toe the party line.
Is that targeted at anyone particular?
No. I think that's actually the way it works in any political party. You can't have people going off in one direction or the other, because what's the point of being in a party then?
I guess for me, I've been in the Labour Party for quite a while now. I joined when I was 18 years old, and been engaged in the way that policy is developed within our party. These guys, most of us are mates. There's strong relationships, and like Chloe was saying, you're a part of a whānau, right? So for me, it's not about towing the party line. The things that we are speaking to are values I like that are deeply seated and embedded into me. The things that we're campaigning on, housing, education, health, jobs, these things are, I see them as critical to the evolution of where we're headed as a nation. Fixing up our waterways. The policy announcement from David Parker and Jacinda Ardern a couple of days ago, that makes me happy, because we have been for 9 years living in this kind of odd little bubble where we've just been too afraid to talk about things like fresh water and actually setting down a real clear national agenda for how we want to tackle it. So I'm really proud to be part of our party. I don't see it as towing a party line. I put my hand up for the Labour Party because I believe in our values.
It's about the kaupapa.
Right. And now you guys, Chloe and Kiri, you guys went to the Parliamentary Drug Law Symposium.
Which was great.
In July, which I heard was great. And there's been a lot of conversation, particularly around how Māori are treated within the system. Emma Espina's Let Māori Speak for Māori article on the newsroom, or there was Kylie Quince's Not About Us Without a speech about Māori exclusion from this very conversation. And I think it was you that echoed a similar sentiment, Kiri. At the symposium. So can you touch on that a little bit? I have a quote from you. It's so disconnected from the system that makes decisions for us.
Yeah, look, I think when you look at a criminal justice system that has over 50% of its population that is incarcerated right now that is Māori, when we've got over 65% of the female incarcerated population is Māori women. When I look at Amy Adams' announcement this morning to get tough on youth offenders and put $60 million into dealing with 150 young offenders that are primarily Māori, I mean, these issues are really, really close to many of our hearts, right? So when Kylie Quince was talking about don't talk about us without us, I mean, to me, that just makes sense, And so I think, when it comes to drugs and alcohol, and we've got crazy high rates of alcohol and drug addiction in Maido here in the East Coast. Huge, big methamphetamine problem. That is, we call it a ngangara, that's like killing our kids, it's killing our communities, it's killing our families. The responses for dealing with issues like methamphetamine and its growth into our communities, that's got to be done with stakeholders within our communities. We can't just write policy down in Wellington and, let it fly up to wherever it needs to go. It's got to be driven by the people that are mostly impacted by the policies that it's intended to target. So I guess, for me, that's a no-brainer for us, the Labour Party.
And Chloe, you were there too, so what was attending that symposium like for you?
It was awesome. I also just want to shout out to Julianne Ginter, MP, for the Green Party, who's really been leading the front line on this discussion for quite a long time, actually. So she announced a few months ago, or at the end of last year, our policy to legalise cannabis. And it's been really interesting going around the country having that conversation with people about taking a health-based approach to drugs as opposed to a criminal-based approach, because incarcerating people isn't helping anybody. So that was essentially the approach which was advocated by the New Zealand Drug Foundation Symposium. It was legalising cannabis, starting there, and then moving towards decriminalising all substances. I think that a really important point that was made, because the example of Portugal came up a lot, is that at the same time that they decriminalised, they also massively increased the funding available for addiction and abuse services for drugs and alcohol. This is not something that happens in isolation. So ultimately, we do need to be moving towards a health-based approach to drugs, and that's absolutely what the Green Party stands for.
And just on that note, I mean, that was also the position advocated by the Labour Party, so we're mates there, cuz.
Oh, please give me the drug question, come on.
I imagine you would have an opinion on this. So do you think our current drug laws are still fit for purpose?
No, they're terrible, and I know that the X-Party does not have a drug policy, which is unfortunate. However, it's well known that David Seymour, our leader, supports reforming cannabis laws. For years I've been talking about legalising cannabis, so you know where I stand on it. And we've also polled our top 10 list candidates. They all agree that we would be voting for Julianne Ginter's bill on medical marijuana if we're elected into Parliament.
Sorry, what? That was going to be my question.
Not everybody in a party feels the same, even in the Green Party.
Okay. And now I just want to move on to something which is obviously quite a heavy topic at the moment, but I think it would be a disservice not to discuss it. Matidia Ture's admission to benefit fraud and her consequent resignation has been polarising, to say the least. Obviously, it's been a tough time for the Greens, so we'll start with Chloe's thoughts on this and work our way down.
Yeah, it's been a really, for lack of a better word, interesting 3 weeks. And it sucks. It sucks that we've lost Met. She spoke about her experience to put it on the table because, in her own words, she spent 15 years in Parliament trying to do that, and all she had left was her own personal story. So it really sucks that we've lost her, and I didn't want her to go, but it was her personal decision to do that. And as she made all of us in the party abundantly aware, the kaupapa is bigger than any one person, and as we made abundantly clear today at our campaign refresh, we are going to continue having this conversation. This conversation makes people uncomfortable because inequality is so entrenched in this country. And because people, if you look at places like the CBD, if you look at, neighbourhoods and communities that are being increasingly gentrified, like Onehunga and my electorate of Maungakiekia, spaces are becoming increasingly homogenous because we are pushing poor people out. If you look at our public transport system, which next to nobody uses because it's useless at the moment, you don't encounter or rub shoulders with people who are different to you, which means that we are losing our empathy right now. And I really hope that we are going to continue with that conversation. And when we get into government, in the heart of the next progressive government, post-September 23rd, we're going to change it all. And we're going to make it better for people.
I think we'll go Stephen and then Kiri.
Okay, look, everybody does something stupid when they're young. Everybody. Including me, and I'm not making any confessions right now. I'm not doing your job for you. But what everybody doesn't do is get up on a stage and boast about their indiscretions and then say that that's the reason you should vote for me. And benefit fraud is not something to be proud of. Theft is not something to be proud of.
I don't think that she was ever proud of it. She never said that it was the right thing to do.
I tell you what, she was sitting in Parliament loving the attention as the scandal broke. So I think that was shameful.
Stephen was right there.
It's been reported to me by excellent sources. However, she had said that the system was broken, and she's right, it is broken. But the solution is not just to throw more bloody money at it, okay? You need to look You need to look at the foundations of what is causing people to struggle in poverty.
Not enough money.
Now, the bottom 20% of income earners in this country used to spend 35% of their income on rent. Now it is 57% of their income on rent, and that's because our housing system is broken. And we're not going to blame the market, because we are not living in a laissez-faire capitalist housing market, I can tell you that very much. We have an artificial land shortage in a country which has heaps of land. Lots of room to sprawl, and if you take away that shortage,
on this for a lot longer. I'm just going to cut in there, Stephen.
Yep.
Stephen and Chloe, I'm going to cut in there. We're going to move on. I can see Russell
you're going to
trying
let
to
me
tell me
finish
to
that
wrap
though,
up.
aren't you?
We haven't had Kiri on this. We'll get Kiri on this quickly, and then we'll go on to the next question.
Yeah.
Wonderful, wonderful.
Yeah. So me and Stephen, we differ a little bit in opinion here. I think the solution is to thump a dump load more of cash and fix the social welfare system that's currently absolutely defunct. When you've got families having to make choices between, you know, putting gas in their car or getting their or buying food for their kids, I mean, that's a real issue. That's the status quo for communities all throughout New Zealand right now. And we used to be a country that was founded on principles of social welfare, where we cared about people. We had compassion for families, but we've ripped the funding out of all of our core social infrastructure, like schools, like health.
It's not true.
It is true. Like, that's true. You know, when you've got families like having to like pay voluntary contributions for their kids to go to public schools, like that's a system that's broken. Families can't like put their kids in school. So anyway, just on that, you and I disagree. But about Mitiria...
well, so does the OECD.
Yeah. But about Mitiria, I just want to say, kai a koe e Mitiria, he wahine, he rangatira. He rangatira e hini. You know, tino pauri te ngā kau, ka koe, ki tō whānau hoki, kai a koutou te memo te rōpū kākariki. Huge loss to, I think, people fighting against social inequalities, poverty. You know, watching this whole kind of affair roll out over the past 2 weeks, and being a young wahine Māori entering into this political fray, it does make you, quite emotional to see what you are actually opening yourself up to. I know the leadership that she had for you fellas, and has had over the last 15 years, the contribution she's made. You know, the issues it is at the moment on the social inequality and the gaps that are growing between our communities. The conversation got lost, and that's been sad, but I have a lot of faith in both our team, your team, and I guess communities that are tackling these issues day in, day out in our communities on the ground through the political fora, that these will be priority issues over the next 6 weeks for all of us. But kai a koutou, ka nui te mihi aroha.
I can see Russell trying to tell me to stop, but I just have one question I'm going to get through very quickly. Okay, I think this is one we will all agree on, because lastly, I just want to touch on what is arguably one of the most important election issues, and that is the youth vote. It's something that I've picked up on
There's really
along the way.
only one youth on this panel.
You know what?
I'm not youth
we're all
anymore,
young.
let's
We're all
be
young.
honest.
It's fine. We're all the same age. Something I've picked up on with the way a lot of politicians engage with a lot of people is that they use this dense political jargon and throw around facts and figures, and what sometimes happens is they struggle to communicate the fact that politics is deeply personal. And I know with a lot of my friends there are feelings of disillusionment and exclusion that come with this. So my question is, how can we make politics more accessible? Stephen?
Well, what we shouldn't do is hold parties and give free entry so that you vote, like we've done in the previous election with rock and roll. I don't think that gives you quality voters. But what you do need to do is pitch...
What is the quality
happened
voter,
in 2014. But I think the solution that you do need to do...
What's a quality voter?
An informed voter. But what I think you do need to be doing is actually talking to millennials and finding out what the issues that are important to them are. And those issues are housing. Number one, I'm 34 years old. I'm in a gay marriage, so I should have pink dollars just throwing around everywhere.
How can we make
and
it
I
more accessible,
And I can't
Stephen?
afford a house, and that's the same for millennials. So we need to be talking to them about the issues that actually matter to them.
Talking about the
superannuation as well. Superannuation
I don't know how
in
many
its current
rangatahi you got
form.
in your electorate talking about superannuation, but I ain't got none.
Kia ora. Okay, and Kiri, I don't think we can leave without discussing the Jacinda effect. Do you think her rise to Labour leader is inspiring generational change?
Well, my cell phone's been going hot over the last 2 weeks by rangatahi that I haven't seen be engaged in our political system. How do we get youth actively engaged in this campaign? Be accessible, you know? Be accessible in every single way, shape and form. And what Jacinda's just done, she looks like people. She sounds like people. She sounds like our community, you know? And so I see, like, all of my cousins, for example, over in Australia, they're going, I like her, I know her, I want to vote for that, cuz how do I enrol? So for me, there's just been a huge, big, massive intergenerational shift in thinking, and people our age.
All of our age.
There's only a decade between us. They are switching on, and that's just been like, I'm getting stopped by young people on the streets in the East Coast going, cuz, how do I enrol to vote? I want to vote for that Jacinta.
Woo! And Chloe, how do we bridge the disconnect and encourage voters to get involved?
Wow, that is the million-dollar question, and there is no silver bullet at all. But I think a good starting point is that we stop talking down to young people. I consistently, I'm one of the token young people in politics, so I'm called up whenever there's any kind of pitch for intergenerational warfare, and it's like, so do you hate baby boomers? And I have to go, well, no, because first and foremost, that's incredibly unproductive, and it's not helping us come towards any kind of solutions. We're all in this waka together. All of these, things like poverty don't discriminate on the basis of age. But getting back to the core of your question, we have to give them something to vote for. I absolutely think that representation is important. People do need to see themselves in politics. But further to that, if you look at the two biggest youth movements in both the United States and the UK in the past few decades, it's been two old white dudes. So, the other fundamentally important thing is having... we can talk about his politics.
Well.
This
is not the place for that.
But so we need to give people something to vote for, and that looks like those fundamentals, that looks like values, that looks like getting away from this technocratic jargon and going, how about we care about each other?
Technocratic jargon.
Okay, anyway, and we're just going to cut it there. I think I'm just going to end on the fact that, yes, I agree that representation is a very important thing. I happen to be young, brown, female, and regardless of whether it's widely reflected or not, these things determine the way that we live our lives. And our existence is deeply entrenched in politics by default, and that's a reason as good as any to get involved. So on that note, exercise your democratic rights. Please vote. I think this is a good place to end, but thank you guys so much. Kitty, Chloe, and Stephen. Everything is political.
Thank you.
We were going to have a 10-minute break, but Jogai used up the whole 10-minute break with democracy. So we'll get the next panel up as quickly as possible. Cheers. You'll just have to sneak to the bar.
somebody will wait.
I mean, I'm ready. We're ready. Okay, so I guess we're just going to move straight into the next panel because we're obviously in the interests of spending more time about the policy and less time about, introductions. We'll quickly boost through who you are, where you're from and why you're here today. Start with you, Tracey.
Kia ora, my name's Tracey Martin. I'm the education spokesperson for New Zealand First, but also spokesperson for Women, Broadcasting, Communications and IT. I'm from Warkworth and I'm accidentally in Parliament because I stood up for something I believed in and found myself in Parliament.
Kia ora mai no tātou. Louisa Wall, I'm the MP for Manurewa. Also the spokesperson for Youth Affairs. What other portfolios have I got? Sport and Recreation, some Justice portfolios. I sit on the Justice and Electoral Select Committee. I also co-chair our cross-party women's group, co-captain the Parley Ferns, but incredibly passionate about being the champion and actually one of the leaders in my community so that the children who grow up in Manurewa have opportunities like every other child in New Zealand.
Kia ora.
Kia ora koutou, I'm Geoff Simmons. I grew up out in West Auckland actually, but now I live in Wellington, so I'm the Opportunities Party candidate for Wellington Central and Deputy Leader.
Cool, so I just have some individual questions for you all before we get into talking about immigration and education. So, Geoff, in the latest News Hub Read poll, the Opportunities Party is polling at around 2%, making you the 5th biggest party. But if Top... So tell me though, if Top doesn't get 5%, is it all for nothing?
Well, no. I mean, we plan to continue on, and you may not have noticed, but in the UMR poll, we're at 3%. So
still not 5 though.
Building.
How are you going to get to the 5?
Well, I think we've had a lot of conversations. The 5% barrier is a massive hurdle, and a lot of people have written us off as not getting there. And I think the fact that we're now getting to 3%, we're starting to look like we're swinging across the canyon and might get to the other side. So I think that whole waste of vote conversation starts to disappear. Regardless, we're carrying on. We're going to be here in 2020.
And so also rumour has it that Top has discussed a policy alliance with the Māori Party. Is this a thing?
A policy alliance with the Māori Party. Well, we certainly are. We talk to all of the major parties about our policies, and with the exception of New Zealand First. Yes, Tracey, if you're wondering. Hashtag anyone but Winston.
Well, I wouldn't want him to mislead you.
Absolutely. Yep, that's clearly our policy. We certainly have a lot in common with the Māori Party, and if anything formal happens in the next wee while, then that will become public. We don't do anything behind closed doors, so it'll all be out in the open if anything is actually agreed.
And so, Louisa, you're the MP for Manurewa. What's the mood in South Auckland going into this year's election?
Well, the mood in South Auckland's mixed, to be honest. Obviously, topically, the biggest issues relate to our homeless situation. And we have people who are every night sleeping on the streets in weather like this. We had somebody pass away on one of the steps of our churches. And I've just been dealing with an issue because some of our shops now don't want people to loiter or sleep in front of them. So I've been in touch with Auckland Council and the police because they're illegal. Also, I guess having interviewed some of our beneficiaries about Matedia's situation, obviously I've got the highest proportion of beneficiaries in the country. So people are struggling. All of my schools have some form of feeding program, whether it be breakfasts or lunch. So extreme poverty. But in spite of all that, I think we've got incredible potential. We've got young people who have just come back from Washington, D.C. as part of a robotics competition from Te Mātauranga School. I've got some of my youth leaders at my youth council. We've just come back from the Aspiring Leaders Conference. I've got business leaders at Manurewa High School who invite me to Maker Market. So, you know, it's really, I think, a context that provides the most challenge for New Zealand. Because we really have the diversity. We have Māori, we have Pacific. So we have those most disengaged with the political process. My enrolment currently stands at 90%. Of the 6,500 not enrolled, 75% are under 30. And between 18 and 24, that's 52% of those not enrolled. So we've got big challenges, but I believe we do have leaders within our community. And for me, they are my school leaders, my principals and my boards of trustees, my church leaders, and really it's the situation and the context that we're growing up in that I believe is creating this generational beneficiary dependency and poverty, but it really is about government policy, so we've got a lot to do. And if we don't get it right in South Auckland, then I actually think we're failing and New Zealand won't be successful.
And so, Tracey, so the latest News Hub Read poll shows New Zealand First taking a bit of a hit, down from 13% to 9%. So although it shows you taking over the Greens as New Zealand's third biggest party, are you worried by this sudden drop?
No. No. I mean, if you're asking for me personally, I don't concentrate on polls. So there's no point, because at the end of the day, my goal is to have the most influence with the largest amount of party vote I can get on the 23rd of September, and then I'll think beyond that, right? So that's the first thing. Inside our caucus, we don't even talk about polls. We don't talk about where we're at. We talk about, and Winston says constantly, if you're thinking about the day after the election, then you're not on the job. So our job is to get out there and spread the policies of the New Zealand First as far and as wide as we can, and then let's deal with how the people vote, rather than trying to predict how the people are going to vote.
But I guess on that note, though, so yeah, Winston hasn't indicated that he's, you know, more leaning towards either sort of side, either National or nor Labour and the Greens. Do you sort of worry, though, that that wouldn't it be fairer to prospective New Zealand First voters to let them know kind of what kind of government your party are going to be part of before, you know, they go to the polling booth?
Well, it's an interesting way, because National people say that and Labour people say that because they want us to try and vote their way. This is our perspective. New Zealand First has policies and principles that we stand for. People will vote on those if they believe in them. That's the end of the day. We have another choice. The assumption is that we will seek power at all costs. Now, we've made a statement before that we will sit on the crossbenches, right? So we don't just have two choices. We actually have four. First of all, you've got National on one side, you've got Labour on another, and we've been in coalition with both. Please, let's remember, 96 and 2005, all right? And secondly, we can stay on the crossbenches, or we could actually get enough vote to lead. And they have to decide who is going to deal with us, not us deciding who we're going to deal with. Those are our realities. That's MMP, and we are focused on maximising our party vote.
And so let's get into the first topic of the panel, so immigration. In simple terms, the debate around immigration is often presented as quite a binary thing. On the one hand, we hear that proponents of immigration say it's crucial to have high immigration to ensure our economy continues to grow and prosper, while those sort of more sceptical of its benefits say that immigrants taking the jobs of Kiwis and that it plays a major role in New Zealand's housing crisis. Is it really as simple as one or the other, though, or can we find a middle ground, and if so, how? I'll start with you, Geoff.
Absolutely. It's a far more complicated and nuanced discussion than that, and I think we need to really grow up and be able to have a conversation about immigration without any of the baggage of racism that comes along with it. You know, there are pluses and minuses with immigration, and we should be able to talk about those openly.
And so how will the Opportunities Party approach immigration?
Well, I mean, obviously there's the refugee situation, which clearly New Zealand is not doing our bit. I mean, against any international benchmarks, the only country that's bringing in as many refugees as New Zealand is currently Trump's America. So, you know, that's not who we want to compare ourselves with. I think we can all agree on that. So, you know, that's one part of the conversation, that we clearly need to increase our refugee quota. We argue quite substantially, quadrupling it to 3,000, to put us on a level with Australia and Canada. The other side of it is economic migration, and in our view, we want to make sure that it's a win-win, that migrants that are coming into this country are better off, and New Zealand is better off for having them here. Now, at the moment, there's clearly examples where that's not the case. There's examples of fraud happening in the student sector which need looking at. There's examples. There's clearly issues with the amount of lower skilled migration that's coming into the country and is depressing wages in certain industries and in certain parts of the country. We all want, everyone, all the major economists seem to agree that the reason that real wages are going backwards right now at the bottom end, and they are going backwards, and when you include housing costs, they're going backwards at a quick rate. The only reason for that any economist can point to is the high levels of migration at that bottom end of the market.
And so, Louisa, with Labor's immigration policy, when it was announced, it sort of focused around the idea that we need to take a breather on immigration. So, kind of accepting, yes, immigration is great for the economy, but currently the levels are too high and investment into infrastructure just hasn't kept up. So that's why we need to ease immigration temporarily. Is that kind of it in a nutshell?
In a nutshell, I mean, net immigration's for the last couple of years been over 70,000. And on average, the last 15 years, it's been 45,000. But there's a difference between net immigration and residency. And so I want to pick up on that point, because residency, yes, we have 8,000 seasonal workers. We have about 750 refugees. We have another 1,750 through the Pacific quota. But we also have, unfortunately, had student visas issued at 52,000 a year. And of those, 24,000 have been able to get work visas. And the people who are getting those work visas are in categories 4 and 5, which are the lowest skilled work visas, which is why I think you saw Unite support our Indian students who have unfortunately been sent home. So that is a problem, which is why we focused on bringing student immigrants who are at bachelor's and post-grad level, because we need immigration. But it has to be high quality, and the students who come here, I believe a minimum should be a tertiary education. So we have flooded ourselves, unfortunately, and National has opened the door to those low quality immigrants. And it's kind of coupled also with tertiary institutions who have and work with agents in India. And one of the tertiary institutions, 80% of the visas that they've applied for have been declined because of fraud. And that's fraud in the completion of those particular applications. So we have had issues, and particularly with the Indian student area, and I believe that what we've proposed will deal to that particular issue. And yes, probably about 30,000 students that have been coming in won't be able to come in, and therefore won't be able to get work visas.
And so, Tracey, do you think Louisa and Geoff are kind of on track with their approaches to immigration, or would New Zealand First do something completely different?
I think it's really interesting that after 23, 24 years, New Zealand First was founded on 15 fundamental principles. Principle number 5 is, and this is our immigration policy, that while we are a small nation, we will always require immigration, but we refuse to use it as an excuse not to train, employ and care for our own people. That's our immigration policy. We have received abuse over 24 years from parties that now say just opening your doors is not helping anybody. And can I just say, immigration is about people. It's not about numbers. These are human beings we're talking about, right? So we've got people here right now who are being taken advantage of because the system allowed a mass of people in who are now either older and isolated, if you look at those that can pre-purchase English language certificates but cannot communicate with the communities they live in. So therefore, and it's predominantly the Asian community who is now isolated and suffering from depression. We've now got students who are looking at deportation and thousands upon thousands of dollars worth of debt to their home nation or to their communities. We did not serve them well, let alone the New Zealanders who have been affected also by a policy that didn't realise this is not just about money, this is about people. So from a New Zealand First perspective, I've been working with the international student organisations because I think what Labor's doing is dangerous. Is dangerous to a $4.5 billion industry, but it's also dangerous to the students that are currently here. There are other levers and other ways that we can have a win-win solution for those organisations that need to actually have students come into this area, also have on-job training, and then we can while we upskill our own people. We must turn down migration, and only by turning down migration can we up our refugee quota. And New Zealand First was the first to come out and say, at Victoria University, up our refugee quota. So I think it's really interesting that every other party has now come to see what New Zealand First has been talking about all this time, 23 years later. We manage it. You turn the tap up, you turn the tap down to make sure that you retain a standard of living for the people you have in your country, whether they came here yesterday or whether they came here 1,000 years ago.
Can I just pick up on that point, though? And that's the issue, Tracey, is that we don't have a decent standard of living. That's why we have
Absolutely
774 people who have been identified as homeless.
Yep.
We have 40,000 homeless people in New Zealand.
That's right.
We don't have enough jobs for the New Zealand citizens, people who are born and bred here.
Totally agree.
And
can I just say, though, that, and this is where I agree with the Green Party stance on this, it is not the fault of the migrants that are coming here. We cannot blame the immigrants for that. New Zealand had a massive underinvestment in infrastructure going back decades, and this is really, this recent boom in migration has just been the icing on a very, very ugly cake. It's just exacerbated those issues.
I've got to say this, though. The leader of TOP actually described these people, some of these people, as flotsam. Now, I find that personally offensive. So from that perspective...
Do you want to get into a conversation about some of the comments from your leader, Tracey?
Well...
Do you really want to go there?
Go ahead. Because what my leader has said is that New Zealand First will bring in people that New Zealand needs, not who needs us. But we
What's
never
your position on Muslims,
them,
Tracey? What's your
never
position on
describe
Muslims?
them as flotsam. How offensive to those human beings.
What's your position on Muslims,
And with
Tracey?
regard to national, just because you don't earn a dollar value doesn't make you a valuable citizen. There are other things that make you a valuable human being and a valuable citizen, not just $49,000 or above.
Can I just say, the biggest issue is the immigrants have chosen to live in Auckland in the last 5 years, 136,000 of them. And that's why we really need to back a lot of the initiatives that I think are coming out of Auckland Council. We need to fix our infrastructure, so transportation. We need to move people into trains, which is why we've come out with our light rail and to the airport, because in addition to that, we have 50,000 people every month who are arriving as tourists in our country, and we just can't service them.
Yeah, but you've got to spread them out regionally too.
We do, but they land at Auckland Airport, Tracey.
I understand.
Can I also just say,
stay here a few nights.
We do have issues right across our immigration system, and we have people that want to come and live in this country who live in the gig economy in the United States, and they can't get in because they don't fit any of the criteria.
They'll fit our criteria.
Well,
because we're
the highly skilled migrant
criteria.
visa, absolutely.
That's right,
but
1,500
and I agree. Well, it was actually our policy first, but I agree with the Labor Party there. And it absolutely makes sense. It's not just a numbers game. We would take 70,000 migrants per year if they were all Indian Einsteins, wouldn't we? I mean, that stuff doesn't matter.
You can't house them. You've got to miss them. You're missing the point.
Shall we move on to the next topic? We've got 5 minutes, so we'll boost through education. So in particular, I'd like to focus on tertiary education. So Tracey, what does New Zealand First have on offer for students?
Okay, so I wrote a policy for New Zealand First that's been accepted by the party, which is to actually to do away 100% with student loans and shift to a skill debt to your country. I was a debt collector. We have, 15 billion heading towards $17 billion worth of debt on our young people. And while you might think that they can pay for their education, they pay with 12% of their incomes for a number of years after that. So we've written the whole policy. It includes workforce planning, it includes careers and transition advice, it includes competition at educational entry. It's the biggest shift for education since people decided to take away investment in tertiary education from our young people. And I wrote it, we launched it in August next year, and if you want more details, email me, I'll give it to you.
I'd like to know how you're going to pay for it, Tracey, at 4.6
billion.
billion?
Sure, I priced it out. I priced it.
Pricing it doesn't tell you where the money comes from.
Let me
Pricing
answer
it doesn't tell you where the money comes from.
$4,100,000 right now is what it costs to run the student loan scheme. Our scheme only costs $500 million more. $750 million is what it takes to run StudyLink. So it costs us $750 million per annum to run a debt system for our young people. So if you want to know where the money comes from, Geoff, it comes from the money that's currently there, and then we reinvest in our young people and we shift the system up to invest in our young.
So you're telling the nation right now that you're going to get free student fees, effectively free student fees, and full-time free student allowances, and it's not going to cost anything.
Well, see, Geoff, the problem with Geoff is he calls himself an economist.
I have many problems.
And then the problem with Geoff is that he doesn't ask about, this is not the current policy, bums on seats, everybody gets it free. This is not that. This is a nuanced shift to make sure that we invest in our young people.
Oh, so you want fewer people going to university? Is that what you want?
There are young people who have gone to... We've got 43% failure rate at our universities. 43% failure rate. They've come out with debt, but they haven't come out with a qualification, and that's the government's report. We want to make sure that those young people meet success, and our numbers are based on at least 20 to 25% choosing a different pathway and being successful rather than failing and coming out with debt.
Okay, so fewer students going to university is the New Zealand First policy. Just checking.
So also, I'll just cut in there. So Louisa, Labor is also proposing 3 years free tertiary education.
Yes.
How does that differ from New Zealand First approach?
I'm not sure about New Zealand First approach, but we're pretty clear that we want to guarantee 3 years free tertiary education. And we're really focused on our NEET kids, so our kids not engaged in education, training and employment. We also want first-time scholarships for families who have never had a child in tertiary education, which I'm really proud of. And we're also going to bring back, adult education, because that's been eroded away over the years, and we think it's an important part of any tertiary education system. Can I just make a point about our NEET kids? I think they are neat, but the problem with them sitting stagnant, not engaged in education, training and employment, is that for a lot of these young people, they end up being quite depressed. Like if people want to really think about our youth suicide statistics, you think about a cohort of 90,000 children where 40% of them are depressed and engaging in drug and alcohol taking because of their oppression and depression. Our policy is very much focused on making sure that the pathways are clear so that we can provide that hope for our young people through our tertiary education system, and I'm really proud of our policy. We're going to implement it progressively. Obviously, we'd love it to start next year, but we'll have to see, but it's something that I believe is a right of every New Zealander. If you've got the potential, you should be able to go on to tertiary education.
How does it work for people who have to do 7 years to 10 years to be our doctors?
How does it work?
Yeah, because there's 3 years free, but then they've still got another 7 years worth of debt. Is that right?
Well, they'll have another, 4. Well, usually it's 6 to 7. Yeah, that's true. But kids now have 7 years of debt, Tracey. So at least we're providing...
You need to come along to see my policy.
Most undergrad degrees are 3 years. Social work was a bit different, actually. At Massey, it was 4.
Teachers now 4.
Teachers now... Well, we're providing a pathway, and hopefully in that final year... Because I think from the stats that you've talked about, it's in the first year that students are most likely to exit the system.
Have you priced that out, Geoff? Labor's policy?
Labor costed things themselves, Tracey.
So did I, Geoff. Actually. So did I with economists,
Bill approved ours, Tracey. So we do have support for our policy. It's a $4 billion education policy.
Yeah, so's ours, Louisa.
Yeah.
And so, Geoff, as far as I can tell, the Opportunities Party has more of a focus on supporting early childhood education. You're not about 3 free years of tertiary education. Is that correct?
No. the 20% of people that come from the top, the people that come from the top 20% of households are 4 times more likely to go to tertiary education than people from the bottom 20% of households, okay? So free tertiary education is middle-class welfare on a massive scale. And actually, you might say, well, actually, the best way to get these kids to go to tertiary education is to make it free, but that's not right. They've done studies on this, and the best way to get kids from poor households to go to university is free, full-time, high-quality early childhood education. Because these kids are turning up at primary school 2 years behind their classmates, and they never make that gap up. They never make that gap up. How are they supposed to qualify and get into university at the age of 17 if they're still at the year 15, they're still at the level of 15-year-olds? Okay.
Actually, I'd like to support that because it is true.
Yeah,
which
that's
is why our
both
policy,
of us have got policies on
we've
it.
got really good policies. In
Have
this
you got
area.
free, full-time, high-quality early childhood
maybe
education?
you should go and price ours out from that perspective.
We're reinstating the subsidy for SEEs who have 100% qualified teachers. We're going to have
But it's only still 20
minimum.
hours. It's only still 20 hours.
And we're also going to make sure in low provision areas that there are special grants and special pathways to ECE.
And we're supporting Kahangarau.
So our policy for people of tertiary age is to create an unconditional basic income of $200 a week between the ages of 18 to 23. So that it doesn't matter if you want to start a business, if you want to go to tertiary education, if you want to do what people do at Weta and just follow people around on the job and watch what they do and learn that way, all totally cool. We want to support people.
How much does that cost, Geoff?
That costs $2.4 billion. We're suggesting it instead of Stephen Joyce's tax cuts. All our policies are fully costed and paid for, Tracey.
Me too.
I don't need to get an economist to look at anything that I write.
Maybe you should have it peer reviewed.
Yeah, we do. Anyway, so the thing with an unconditional basic income is that there are no eligibility criteria. There's no administration that comes along with it. And the main thing is that it doesn't matter what situation you're in, you always get it. And for those neat people, a large chunk of which don't even get the benefit, this has been shown overseas, an unconditional basic income is one of the greatest things you can do to improve the mental health of that group because it just takes the pressure off completely. They don't have to interact with the dehumanising benefit system that is work and income.
And so, Tracey, what are your thoughts on an unconditional basic income?
Yeah, no, well, first of all, it's TOP's policies, not ours, but I'll tell you this. So we've got the business-linked internship scheme, and I ran a pilot, I privately funded a pilot in 2013, 2014 in Warkworth. And it was for the 60% of students in the middle. So not for the 20% that need specialist support or not for the 20% that go on to university, but for the 60% in the middle that everybody says you'll be fine. Young man, got an AIMS computer qualification, $20,000 worth of debt, couldn't find a job. We ran a program that, for those young people, connected them to business champions in our town. They felt validated. They were able to come out of their rooms. They were connected to their communities. They had on-the-job credits that they were able to earn, and they earned references for their business. And that young man went on to be in charge of the IT department at Auckland Hospital. Now, what I'm saying is, you can't just give somebody some money and leave them alone. It's not adequate. It's not good enough. So it's all very well and good to say we were going to hand you out between 18 and 24, $200 a week, and away you go. That doesn't work.
You know better than young people what they want to do, Tracey?
I do. I talk to young people every day, Geoff.
And they come to you for advice on what to do in this great new economy that we have, 21st century.
So if you made an ageist decision that I don't know who I talk to, with a son who's 22, a son who's 19, a daughter who's 16, and who interacts constantly with my electorate.
I trust people to know what they want and know the best way.
So how many young people came and asked you for $200 a week for free?
I know that it's not. The UBI hasn't been magicked out of nowhere, Tracey. It is.
So who asked for it?
It's been tested all the way around the world, and it is the future of our benefit system.
So how did you communicate with young people of New Zealand? How did you communicate with the young people of New Zealand?
Can I just communicate our policy, which is to actually have apprenticeships and to use that unemployment benefit to encourage, and so people are supported, Tracey, business owners to take on young people, to give them a go, so they are supported. To a degree, I agree with Tracey. I think giving money to depressed people isn't the solution, but giving money to people who are then supported in areas that hopefully they're passionate about. I love this book called What Colour is My Parachute? I've been trying to talk to my intermediates so that before kids leave there and go to high school, they do this, and what it shows, it's based on your characteristics, your motivation. So when they get into that secondary environment, teachers already know what the kids are passionate about. I think our biggest challenge at the moment is how do we get our kids out of school? It's all good if you've got a dream and aspiration. It's good, easy for sports people because we all want to go to the Olympics and win world championships. But for other kids who don't have a goal, who don't have a dream and aspiration, going to school sucks and they don't go, they drop out of the system. And I think that it does. And I think that's our biggest challenge. How do we provide our kids with the support that what they're interested in, what motivates them, we support them to leverage off that motivation so that's something to do.
And that's why we need to reduce the amount of testing and administration that our teachers face, right?
Because exactly, we're
teachers
getting rid
don't
of
help the kids.
NCEA. You're getting rid of it, NCEA is gone.
Yeah. No, national
Oh,
standards.
sorry, not...
We're doing a review of NCEA.
Oh, yeah?
Sorry,
I think ours is getting rid of NCEA.
Okay, with that, I'll just jump in.
I work with Chris a lot. I think you'll find we're doing a review of NCEA and we're actually removing national standards.
Oh, very good. Okay, thanks.
Thank you to Geoff Simmons, Louisa Wall and Tracey Martin. They'll all be back for the final panel, so you can ask them your questions then.
I don't know. I mean, I'm very pro-Green Party.
Probably say a Labour-Green coalition.
They're a lot more environmental aware than like National.
I mean, I just don't think National. I think they've done an all right job. I think they get a lot of smack, and I can see why. But I think they're not doing enough for, I guess, poverty, and housing. I mean, they've got some policies, but I think, particularly Green had poverty was at the forefront of their of their policies. But now that Matiti is gone, I think it might kind of lag behind. She was very, very good, but what can you do?
Does it drive you crazy you have to wait for another 3 years?
Not really. I feel like, we're in Assembly and they're talking about elections and I'm just thinking, do I really have to be here?
Do you wish you were voting in this election?
I am.
You are?
I am voting this election.
Congratulations. Very responsible, isn't it?
I know. I'm a bit nervous because I'm not quite sure who I'm going to vote for yet. But...
Do you know how it works, the voting system?
I do.
Yeah, I think that the voting age should be lowered to 16 because by the time we reach 16, we generally have enough of an idea about politics to be able to look into it ourselves, look into it effectively, and then make an educated voting decision. Also, a way another person put it is, if you can have sex, you can vote.
Hello everyone. Because there was just so much democracy to be had, we've actually run over all our breaks. So we're going to get stuck in because James Shaw is coming up after this and he does actually have to get on a plane. And Susan has important things to do as well. The people you see here have just been at the New Zealand Centre for Investigative Journalism Conference, which is one you might not have heard of, but basically all the best journalists in the country were there this weekend. And I should introduce them as well. This is Susan Strongman, who used to work for the Herald, now with the Wireless. Mr. Matt Nippert of the New Zealand Herald. And Keith Ing, who in theory still has a blog on public address, but sluts himself around everywhere. Chewy Data. Yeah, Keith, I think we've always had trouble defining exactly what you do.
Random data nerd.
Right, there you go. Maybe just a quick chat about the conference itself. I mean, what actually happens at this conference? Do you all get in the room and practice speaking truth to power, or what? What happened?
Well, there's a lot of whinging about the OIA and about ministers not returning calls and hanging up on them. That's always good.
And we trade names about who those people are so that we all sort of get warned off the bad ones.
And we also plot about how to take down the left wing.
And I know exactly. And I know exactly what you're alluding to there. It's been a slightly odd week to be a journalist. There was one chap on Twitter suggesting that it was a pity that there weren't re-education camps for us.
Yeah.
And I'm not entirely sure he was entirely joking either. Is it a fair cop? And we're talking about materia. Well, was the pursuit of materia untoward and unprecedented, or was it just journalists doing their job? Keith?
I just want to say that I'm on the pro-materia side, so I'm probably like in home crowd here. Can I get you guys to like just keep an open mind before we really get stuck into this? So the sort of metaphor that I have in my head about what's been going on, it's like somebody ran into a burning building to save someone and didn't make it out, and the media is sort of going, well, it's very honourable and very noble and very courageous that they did this thing, but really they should have known that, you know, running into a burning building was a terrible idea. And they should have ran faster, you know? If I was doing it, I would have been able to run faster and I would have been able to get out. And it's that real sort of ethical judgment is there. That ethical judgment is like, oh, ultimately Materia was a courageous person, that this was a good thing. But let's look at the political management, let's look at the spin, and look at how badly she did in that area. And to really just focus on that one side, but to not make that ethical judgment, even though it's just sitting there.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying, Keith. Although your metaphor...
We practiced this last night.
Probably not quite perfect, given, you know, Materia is now engulfed in flames. And sort of asking, should she have run into a burning building? Well, in hindsight, no. But I think the question about this being reduced to sort of game playing and political management, I think it's a fair one. A lot of the pundit commentary coming out is written by, you know, senior long-serving gallery types who watch a lot of this. However, that's not to discount the fact that political management is vitally important. Holding your shit together is an important part of being in government. Like, I haven't seen a party melt down like the Greens have this week, losing 3 MPs since, I think, the Alliance over the Afghanistan war? And at least in that case, they could blame George W. Bush for declaring the war, not themselves.
So, just to extend my fire analogy, the media is the fire here. It is the fire saying, why are you burning? Like, can't you just not burn as much? And like, I think there's a real sort of like, just real sort of injustice, really sort of fucked off element to having the media, having like Patrick Gower saying like, you know, why is the Greens falling apart? What's wrong with you? After the media is the one that put the pressure and created that cycle and created a political theatre around it for the past 2 weeks.
Well, I don't think it's the media that... I mean, first of all, the media's job is to hold all MPs accountable. And if you, for instance, if you make sort of claims about why you're standing in your background, these will naturally get scrutinised. You know, we saw Donald Trump's, you know, claimed billionaire status and business history detailed quite extensively over the last election, right? And, you know, similarly, if you stood on the hero of sort of some sort of war hero record, that would be scrutinised. And I think it's... I think it was fair to start asking those questions and probing them. And in terms of sort of the level of scrutiny Materia faced, I don't think it's out of proportion. I mean, Todd Barclay sort of hasn't been able to leave Invercargill for weeks. I mean, he's been properly hounded.
He also complained to the police about journalists hounding him.
Yeah, and I just remember the amazing scenes of David Garrett. I remember Fairfax actually got all their reporters in Wellington to blockade every single exit from Parliament when it came out that, you know, he'd been a complete Day of the Jackal nut job. And he was not allowed to leave without being like doorstopped. And this, I don't think this has happened in the case of Materia. So questions are being asked, scrutiny is being applied, but I don't necessarily see it as being out of whack.
Susan, you are a part of Radio New Zealand at the Wireless, which, irony of ironies, appears to have provided the final straw for Materia by being contacted by the extended family member and then going to her for answers to related questions. Did Checkpoint have any choice but to follow those up? Would it have been right to have said, no, go away, this is irrelevant?
Absolutely not. Like, if it had been the same situation but with Paula Bennett, we would have done it. Obviously, any other MP would get the exact same amount of scrutiny. If someone comes to us and tells us things like this, obviously it's our job to put those questions to the MP. Otherwise, if we reported it without,
Well, I
putting
mean,
it to the
what
MP.
occurred to me was there was, and you could see it wildly on Twitter this week, was a fundamental clash of perspectives. Journalists were obliged to see Materia as someone who'd been an MP for 15 years and wanted to be in the governing executive, and a whole lot of other people saw a brown woman being attacked.
Well, I think it's got to stop before we talk more about Twitter. We should acknowledge it basically is left-wing talkback, right? So let's just. I think everyone needs to remember this, that when things seem huge and explosive, it's just Twitter. I can also share another secret from the Herald's data analytics. We get more referrals from Bing than from Twitter. Make of that what you will.
And of course, the other thing that's happened concurrently is Jacinda Mania, which some people are now starting to grumble about. John Drinnan thought it had gone too far, and thought one of the reasons was, quote, feminism. I mean, did the media get too enthused, or did she earn that?
Oh, Jacinda's a woman. Oh, feminism's about women. Oh, I get it now. The conspiracy's revealed. It was just such a like banal thing to say. Jesus.
I think the media's a pretty good, and this might be really naive, but I think the media's a pretty good reflection of what people are thinking at the time. If we're reporting on Jacinda and people are reading it, then they're obviously interested in it. And I know it's a bit more complex than that, but.
Do you think there's a temptation amongst journalists, particularly on TV, to want to be on the right side of history, to be the first to call it? Which I wonder whether that's what Paddy Gower was doing this week.
None of us are TV journalists.
That's why you're allowed to be honest about
doing
TV.
things like this.
Yeah, and it's quite tricky because I come from a sort of a news reporting background, and I think the analogy to draw between the sort of work that I do and that of pundits is that they stir the pot. Meanwhile, I find new ingredients to add to it. And TV journalism particularly has sort of tended towards this. It's almost straight out of cable news in America with really, really strong opinions and this blend of reportage and opinion. And I think it keeps people more engaged. Like it is the tabloid secret sauce of maintaining your ratings. But I mean, it's something I'd never be comfortable doing myself. I understand why those guys do it, but you guys should always be aware that of that distinction between editorial and opinion. Sorry, it's opinion and sort of reportage.
But can I bring this back to the first conversation, which...
Are we going back to the fire?
Yeah. That it's sort of a political narrative, right? That you've got to generate a whole story about, like, hey, a new leader has come along, there's a refresh, that if the narrative was just a new leader came along and nothing happened, then it would be a really shit narrative. And I guess part of what I was saying about the issue with the coverage of Materia was that the journalists feel compelled to build this narrative to follow it through when that stuff isn't driven by what's underneath. It's driven by what other people in the gallery are doing and what stories have come out the day before. And so it's just a self-perpetuating cycle which isn't really... Nobody particularly makes it happen. It just happens because that's a dynamic of the press gallery.
It was interesting that Geoff Simmons said before that he checked his numbers, his party's numbers, and he can because he's an economist. But who else is doing that? I mean, Labour's numbers, the only third party to check Labour's numbers was, of all people, the Taxpayers Union, who were obliged to say that they added up. Is that a job for the media?
I checked those numbers, but it was like, there's like... So with some of the immigration policy...
NZIER, all right.
NZ, no, it was Burrow, and it was Burrow who was paid by Labour. So it's but
nitpicker.
But the issue there was like there's some assumption that you can doubt, but it is policy people who are making those assumptions in really normal policy ways. So there's not really that much you can do with it.
I've just noticed that every time you speak, there's a peal of thunder.
It is also extremely early in their campaign. I mean, some policies have been rolled out, but I think the vast bulk of them, for all parties, is still to come in the next few weeks. And I think you'll see a lot more scrutiny on how much people are promising to spend and raise. Yes, and absolutely the media has a duty to look at and scrutinise those, and I expect we will in the coming weeks.
And also, I think you've got one of your reporters is out doing Vox Pops, talking to a lot of people as well. So that's all yet to come.
And the Herald had a page 3 story, which is an important story in terms of pages, on Labor's transport policy, Auckland transport policy, which was
We've
released on Sunday.
We've also got some other strands of reportage. I think we're having a big look at a whole range of issues, at health and poverty, and I'm sure we've got others, but I haven't been privy to those meetings because I generally try to stay out of campaign reporting because it drives me nuts.
I think the Nation's doing a big policy thing every week between now and the election, so look forward to that.
Another thing we've seen in this campaign, which we haven't seen before, and it's not quite like every election people say blogs are going to be important, and they never really are.
Except for last time.
Yeah. Except for last time, yes. Is you've got very experienced journalists like Tim Murphy and Simon Wilson working for new independent websites and doing this role that's kind of a correspondent role. It's partly a commentator, it's partly a reporter. And you've also got Greater Auckland, the transport advocacy site, having quite an impact on the campaign in the shape of Labor's Auckland transport policy. How's that shaping things, do you think?
So, to bring it back to materia, but it's this general, I guess it's a part of this reaction against traditional formats of reporting, that the way that the newsroom is writing stories is actually quite different from the way that you see stories on websites. And it's really interesting that that stuff is coming from people that are smack bang in the middle, who are like really high-level players in the traditional media. And I think that's what we're going to see more of. Not just different people reporting, but different types of reporting, different ways to tell stories.
Yeah, because that's what I found interesting, is that it is a blend of reporting and of punditing.
Yeah.
I don't think that's a good thing. Can I just interject here? Because people already have a hard time telling the difference between punditry, opinion, comment, and what I do and what Matt does, which is reporting facts. And I know we're all living in our little media bubble, and so we understand that really clearly, but I think a lot of people don't, and I think that's an issue.
What are you doing with the wireless? What have you got coming up?
Don't ask me that. Next question.
Well, you've done some good stuff recently.
Thank you.
Your synthetic cannabis thing was very good.
I mean, I got hit over the head with a handbag.
Right.
Yeah.
Sorry, literally?
Yeah, literally.
Okay.
But
you guys should all read it. Wireless.co.nz.
The other part of that question was also about the influence of so-called advocacy media, which I think, I mean, if you look at Greater Auckland and you look at Bike Auckland, they've made a difference in that policy area. And bless their hearts, the Taxpayers Union. They publish relentlessly and they do get heard. Is that good for democracy? In that it spreads some of this is journalism's job.
Again, I think sorry, I know you weren't addressing that at me, but I think there's confusion between what's a lobby group and what's a legitimate, I don't know, I don't like people going to Taxpayers Union for comment on a story about tax because they're not a union for taxpayers, they're a lobby group.
But I think
that's wrong.
I think that highlights a really important issue, that people who are objective journalists who are reporting in traditional ways do end up using the Taxpayers Union's opinions as part of their stories.
Well, I wouldn't.
well, in the case of the transport advocates, the journalists end up using their numbers because their numbers are usually right, which is kind of interesting. Again, Keith speaks.
I guess a part of it is that those are people with specific expertise, and that does become, you can't really be an expert and not have an opinion and not have a position about how things should be. And so I guess as a part of bringing in more expertise rather than opinion, you do actually become opinionated. The stories become opinionated.
I think that I don't really think Transport Blog, or whatever they're called now, are comparable to Taxpayers Union, though. I mean...
No, they're not.
No.
They try to play in the same space, but yeah, they're very different things.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have much to add, except that I've probably written more about tax in the media than anyone else over the last 18 months. And I've never once called John Williams for comment.
Thank you.
And just one final question. Apart from the race itself, and everyone complains about the race being called, but it's what we're all fixated on, what do you think is going to be the key story of this election campaign? What's it going to be about?
I personally think that housing could, well, it's sort of in a very interesting stage at the moment where the market's sort of holding its breath. It looks to be falling, but no one wants to sell and start realising losses. So we may see the debate move from housing affordability to sort of negative equity stories, which would be a welcome change in debate, but it's more a symptom of a bubble that no one's managed to deal with over the last 6 or 7 years.
Right, and with that, we're going to wrap up. We've got James Shaw coming up next, and before James, you will see some more Vox Pops conducted by that promising young broadcaster, Mikey Havoc, with the students of Western Springs College. So we'll be back very soon. Cheers. Thanks, guys.
I don't trust National. I think they're just, they should be investing in like housing and the educational system.
Most trustworthy. God.
Jacinta Ardern. I think she's really strong-willed, and she's come out to visit here a lot, and all of the points that she puts across I think are quite valid, and she interacts with a lot of the people in her community, like this is her electorate in Mount Albert, so I think the way that she interacts with a lot of people, and she's very strong about what she stands for, and I think that that's really admirable.
What does she stand for?
Probably.
Like, would you get the New Zealand First to house at your house, or would you get, or give them the keys to your car? Would you get the ACT Party to babysit?
I would not trust Winston Peters with my baby at all.
Why not? Why not?
I'd like to think that the current Labour leader, the new Labour leader, is trustworthy because I know her personally through my parents.
I think that the loss of Materia Ture is going to affect the Greens badly.
I think it's a huge loss. I mean, she was extremely charismatic, very well liked. I mean, I don't think it was fair what happened to her. I mean, I understand, she did, she committed a crime, but it was I think everyone's upset about the electorate, fraud things she's done, but I mean, that was when she was in her 20s, 23. She's part of the McGillicuddy Serious Party. She clearly, wasn't taking things very seriously, and tons of people do that. It's very minor.
You got that to look forward to.
Oh yeah, no, I can't wait. I'm very excited.
She has defrauded the government, and I can understand why she's done that. I can understand why she would do that, but still she's standing up, and she is just saying that she's kind of above that, which I don't think that that's really okay.
I think the media kind of packed together and just went after her unnecessarily. I mean, I think media in New Zealand is very right-wing biased, particularly Mike Hosking. Yeah, a bit of a... I'm not going to call any names, but I mean, I definitely don't think he should...
Bit of a dick?
Yeah, well, yeah, I mean, if you want to say that, sure.
Right, and we're back. James Shaw, thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
It's clearly been a hell of a week. As you noted, in a tweet that went out at the same time as you were speaking, which is a very good trick, our slogan for this campaign was great together, but we haven't been all that together and it hasn't been all that great. Do you take any responsibility for that personally?
Yes, I do. I was co-leader. It happened on my watch.
What went wrong?
Well, so another thing that I said today is that when we get through the election, we're going to sit down and do some reflection and kind of have a proper look at it. Right now, I've got 6 weeks to win an election, recover the trust of all of those people who have supported us in the past, and change the government. And so I'm not spending a lot of time sitting down going, what happened in the last 4 weeks, because I'm too busy dealing with the next 6 weeks.
It is true, though, isn't it, that you have a different Green Party now than before all this happened. I mean, I've seen people agonise about resigning their Green Party membership, and they've done it. So it's a different looking Green Party now. What are the implications of that?
You say it's a different looking Green Party. Yeah, some people have resigned, but people resign all the time. I mean, we've had people resign over different policy positions that we've taken. We've had people join as... we've had I think it was something like 170 people joined this week. It's the largest single membership jump that we've had since Donald Trump was elected. Where we had 250 people joined in the space of 24 hours. And we've had, donations coming in and so on. And the party is roughly twice as big as it was when I took over as co-leader only 2.5 years ago. So there's, yes, it's a different party, but I mean, parties change. So what are the implications? Implications are we get on with the election.
There's been a great deal of anger, and you, at one point, were moved to point out to people that journalists were just doing their job. Were you concerned by any aspect of the response?
Yeah. You asked the question of that panel. You said, is it journalists just doing their job, or is it, like a brown woman under attack? I mean, the answer is actually both, right? And it is a bit of both. And I don't resent the media for doing its job. And I think somebody said, Matt said, if you compare it to David Garrett, or like there have been people who have been in worse situations when it comes to the kind of the media heat. And yes, if you look at some of the reckons over the last month, they generally did come from a bunch of, middle-class white guys who have never experienced the kind of situation that Materia and the people that she was speaking for have been in. And I find it very hard to judge. I find it very hard to pass judgment on someone who is in that kind of situation. But some of these guys found it extremely easy to pass judgment on that without having the first clue of what that is like.
No, and that was presumably what the strategy was, with having Materia reveal what she'd done, was to actually bring home the reality. And yet it kind of got drowned out by all the noise, didn't it? Yeah,
it did. I mean, it's funny. So I signed off on her speech, and I looked at it and I read it through, and I was like, it's a pretty good speech. And I sent her an email and I said, it's a pretty good speech. And that's all I said. And I hadn't anticipated the kind of level of venom that exists in our country towards people who are in that situation. I mean, I really just had no idea that kind of undercurrent that we've got. And I was talking to one of our candidates today at our relaunch who said, yeah, look, it's been tough and it's been a sad week, and, he said, but the thing that I'm most disappointed in is New Zealand. He said, because for me it's revealed a side of our society that I wasn't terribly aware of and I'm deeply ashamed of. And that's been my experience over the course of the last 4 weeks, is just going, for Christ's sake, do we have this little compassion? Do we have this little comprehension? It's really blown my mind, to tell you the truth.
And yet, according to that News Hub poll, you're talking about more than half of Green voters. You are describing as apparently unempathetic and, to be ashamed of. What's that mean?
Well, what I think it means is that, New Zealand is a pretty wealthy society net, right, overall, but there's about a third of people who, have actually seen their circumstances go backwards over the course of the last, 30 years, but, particularly in the last 10 or so. And we don't intermingle with them very much, right? And I think Kiri said this before. Allan was talking about this before, this kind of gulf that exists between different parts of New Zealand. And when you actually have no interaction, then it's very hard to have empathy. And look, I put it down to, I'm not saying, people are bad and wrong for holding these opinions or anything like that, right? And people have different priorities in life. And some people have very principled stands around the rule of law and, doing the right thing and all of that. But to me, there's a kind of a grey zone where you say, actually, there's a context at play here, and you've got to understand that context.
Kiri also tweeted, wow, that was lightning, tweeted to the effect that for all that she was aware that the system was broken and not working, she was not about to go and tell young brown kids that it was okay to go and break the law. So that was her perspective. Do you think that Materia was doing that?
No. Jesus. She said this over and over and over again. She never, ever asked anybody to agree with her, right? All she was doing was describing the situation of good, honest people, solo mums, who are forced into bad choices. Bad choices. Not good choices. This is not like something that you do easily or voluntarily or that you're proud of, wherever that ACT Party guy has gone. You know, not proud of, but saying, you know, when you're stuck in these circumstances, right, and you've got the choice between do I feed my kid or do I bend the rules with a government agency, you know, what are you going to do, right?
Well, and that's interesting because my first response was to write a blog post about that, which I had never done before.
Mm.
You know, I bent the rules as well.
Lots and lots and lots and lots of people do. And lots of people do, you know, because they can, and lots of people do because they have to, you know. And I'm not saying it's a good thing, but I'm saying at a point that the system has that little integrity, it's probably time to take a look at the system itself, right?
And it wasn't wildly well received, as you noted. You were disappointed in New Zealanders, but don't you plan your actions for the political environment that you have rather than the one you wish you had?
Yeah, sure. And I think, I mean, Materia herself said the weekend that she made that speech, and we were in the press stand-up afterwards, somebody said, this is an enormous risk. And she said, yes. It is a risk. It's a risk for her personally. It's a risk for the Green Party's campaign and our strategy. And it was a risk that we took because, there was a boring election. We were sleepwalking into it. Everyone was sleepwalking into it. And there was no real conversation about substance. But the most importantly, she herself had been fighting for 15 years to get the conversation around poverty on the agenda. And she chucked everything at it, right? This is a politician with 15 years' experience. And, you know, members' bills and campaigns and, you know, election campaigns, whatever have you, never really got the conversation going. And at the end, she felt that the last card that she had to play was to tell that story. And I have to say, it's worked. So, yes, there's a shit ton of controversy out there, right? Thank you. There's a lot of controversy out there, but what I have seen, in the limited time I've had in the last week or so to look at the media, are actually taxi. There are actually stories, you know, and op-eds and some good investigative journalism coming out. Look at Mikey's piece the other day for RNZ, actually going over to the WINS offices and talking to people and so on. You know, that there is actually journalism and a debate going on about the state of poverty and what we can do about it in this country that simply did not exist 4 weeks ago and would not exist for the rest of this election. I'm sort of starting to feel a bit worried about holding an electrical device in my hand while this is going on.
I think we're all right for the moment,
okay.
But yeah.
Yeah, anyway, so there is a debate about poverty that didn't exist 4 weeks ago.
Indeed, and yet nonetheless you've been spending the afternoon when it was lovely weather rebooting your campaign. We actually have a copy of that ad if people haven't seen it. Hugh, can we roll that?
With you and the Green Party, Aotearoa New Zealand can be a place where businesses are booming in a thriving green economy, where families are supported and our environment is respected and cherished. This election is crucial. It's time to give New Zealand a great green heart in government. Don't sit this one out. All of our futures depend on it. Party vote Green.
And your campaign slogan is...
Love New Zealand.
Yeah, which was the one you had in 2014. It's very green of you to recycle.
It is. We're actually we're actually... I told that joke earlier today.
Oh, really?
This is not an original.
I did not nick it
from you. This is not an original. Yeah, so I'm actually claiming that we're upcycling because last time it was the full Love New Zealand. This is an icon-based thing. Hearts and stuff.
So how do you proceed now? What's changed now? You don't have Materia there. Marama Davidson stepped up to take over her issues.
Yeah, that's right. So, well, actually, no, Materia is going to continue on that campaign. And, you know, so she's decided to stay as a candidate for Te Tai Tonga in order to participate in not just that campaign there, but in the whole Māori electorate campaign around the country. because so many of the constituents that we are talking about, so many of the people who are engaged in this thing are Māori, of course. And she'll be an incredibly important part of that campaign team. And I think the thing is, of course, a lot of people have come out of the woodwork in the course of the last month or so.
I think we may have to wrap up really soon,
A lot
actually. Right.
A lot of people have come out of the woodwork in the last 4 weeks. You people are champions, you know that?
Yeah.
Really. Who there is a real risk. They came forward and they said, look, thank you for telling this story because your story is my story. And the thing that I'm most worried about is that they will feel like here is a woman who was in their circumstances, who got her act together, put herself through law school and went on to become the co-leader of the third largest party in the country, took on the system and got beaten by it. So what does that say to somebody who is still in those circumstances? And so it's really important for Materia to still be in that campaign and talking to those people. Otherwise, you know, we could lose them.
Do you think that means that there will be a different kind of Green voter in this election? Because those vox pops that Checkpoint went and did in South Auckland were pretty remarkable. And you guys never polled there.
No,
you guys don't get votes there, and yet all these people said they were inspired.
Yeah, and I'm delighted by that. And it's been a focus of our campaign. And we've got some great candidates in South Auckland and in other parts of the country as well.
Sure.
So a lot of electrical equipment getting wet
Yeah.
here at the moment.
Okay, we're going to wrap up. I don't think we should actually do our final panel, actually, because it's looking very dangerous. One more thing. What do you expect Materia to be doing? Because I have heard tell she would quite like to go and be an anarchist again. What do you think she'll do now?
What do you mean go and be an anarchist again? She's never stopped being an anarchist, you know, and she represents the great city of Dunedin, which I have to say has got the greatest concentration of anarchists I've ever come across. So what do I expect her to do? I expect her to take a nice long holiday, and I hope that she gets out of the country and has a good rest before she decides what she wants to do with the rest of her life.
Great. Hey, thank you very much, James. It actually is. This is getting biblical.
Tell me about it.
Yeah. Hey, thank you very much. I'm kind of amazed that we got away
Thanks,
with
everybody.
it. There's actually a severe thunderstorm watch in place at the moment, and I think it just happened quite severely. So thank you to everyone. Thank you to Orcon. Thank you to Golden Dawn. Thank you to all our guests. And thank you to Materia. Good night. Cheers.
Trying to get a job.
There's a bit of a problem with the amount of overseas buyers. I can't really say that without sounding like a Trump supporter, though.
I'm just neutral on immigrants. I don't think that they're neither harmful nor amazing for the country. I mean, they both come with pros and cons.
I think poverty and climate change are two of the biggest things that we need to be thinking about.
Probably looking at housing and in terms of like homelessness as well as housing markets and things, particularly in Auckland. That's a big issue related to a whole lot of wider issues like poverty and just jobs and public transport as well. I think we are definitely trying to convince ourselves that we have this clean green image, but in terms of the way that we farm, it's very negatively impacting the environment. Like there are some farms that you embrace a lot of technology in order to make their farming practices more sustainable and more carbon neutral, and I feel as though with some funding from the government and having that rolled out, it would make it a lot more effective and keep our industry up, but also make it more clean green like we claim.
Virtual reality, artificial intelligence, and what one is really important I find is how we're going to I guess what's it called again? Automation of things, such as a lot of I think it's in the next 20 to 30 years, around 50% of jobs are just going to go, and I've seen very little preparation by any of the parties.
Personally, I think poverty very important. I mean,
we're in one of the most successful economic upswings for ages.
Oh yeah, but that doesn't. I mean, yeah, that's great, but we're leaving behind a lot of children, we're a good country economically, we're right, but surely a country that is so good economically should be doing more to provide for everyone rather than just a couple of individuals here and there. We're 240-ish odd thousand children living in poverty. I mean, of course, that doesn't mean they're starving and freezing to death, but they're lacking behind the rest of our society, which shouldn't be okay in a country in this day and age.
I hate how they constantly bag the other parties. I don't want to know about that. I want to know what they're trying to do. It doesn't matter to me that they're, that somebody's done something wrong and then they're capitalizing on it, saying this person is bad because of that and you shouldn't vote with them because of that. It should be just how they're going to fix the problem, how they're going to resolve it and make New Zealand a better place, because it's about the people, not the party.